Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I could really use a wish right now, wish right now, wish right now. Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I could really use a wish right now, wish right now, wish right now.
Yeah, I could use a dream or a genie or a wish to go back to a place much simpler than this. Cause after all the partying and smashing and crashing, and all the glitz and the glam and the fashion, and all the pandemonium and all the madness, there comes a time where you fade to the blackness. And when
Hello guys, welcome to another edition of Birds of a Feather. It's your girl, AJ, Suburban Princess, here to discuss something that I never thought I would talk about, especially when it concerns our Eagles. But it's actually the week before a first playoff game. Now, even before I even did this podcast last summer, I never in my life have worked through a postseason. And this is my last year working at the Link, and I'm really, really excited that it's actually another postseason. Now, the last postseason they had was 2013, and they went to, and they had a playoff round at home, and it was against the Saints. So wouldn't that be ironic that after the Eagles had finished the regular season 13-3, we're not going to talk about the Dallas loss because that was irrelevant, even though it was the slowest, most boring game. There's nothing really to talk about, so whatever. You lose by 6-0, it's not that big of a loss, especially to the Cowboys who have been eliminated weeks ago, so whatever. But just knowing that your boys have a chance to redeem themselves from the past, not inspiring play in the last couple weeks, especially since Nick Foles has taken the helm since the LA trip. And, there are a lot of people scratching their heads and praying and, hearts dropping in their throats. And some people who've just decided to say, F it, wait till next year. But I, for one, have been torn. I'm not even going to lie. I was conflicted. I mean, especially after the way they played against the Raiders on Christmas, and then New Year's Eve was just as depressing, but not because of them necessarily, but just because the game itself just didn't really have any kind of oomph to it. But playing against the Raiders, it showed me that the Eagles have to get out of this crutch mentality that they had developed since Carson left, and that was hoping that, I don't know, somewhere along the line, Foles will catch fire and start playing like Wentz, I guess, or throw the ball like Wentz. But either way, you could tell that the team became very uninspired after the Raiders, which they barely won that game. And I didn't understand why they barely won that game because the Raiders aren't that great lately. And they put up a pretty good fight. In fact, picking off Foles wasn't very hard. And it seemed like the defense got a little lax again. So, the one reassuring thing is that Foles did have a pretty decent game when they played the Giants. So the week before the Raiders game, we know that the team is liable to play together, but it hasn't been consistent. And I'm sure it's because, like I said before, the crutch mentality. When you are a team that is so used to a certain type of tempo and a certain type of flair with a quarterback, when you go to someone who's very generic and pedestrian as Foles, it's very hard to maintain the same rhythm, and it's very hard for the other players to kind of get their own feet under them. And it just seemed like, not even counting the Dallas game, but during the Raiders game, it just seemed like a lot of the players didn't really know where they were supposed to be. Now, I kind of chalk that up to coaching. I mean, maybe because of the holiday. Maybe Doug was a little too easy on them to take extra day off to be with family because maybe they kind of BS their way through the playbook. I don't know. But thank God that Ronald Darby woke up in time on the defense and got that pick, because I think that was the light that they needed to get them back in the game to barely win it. And it wasn't really a sexy score. I mean, I really predicted they were going to win by like 20 or so points, and they're lucky they got by a touchdown and a kick. But so now we're starting to see that they may not be the reason why this team has been 13-3 since Carson left. It may really have come down to just Carson. Carson may have been one of the most consistent, focused players at the quarterback position I've seen in a long time. And Donovan had a natural talent, so I don't think that Donovan had to really think much about what he did. But hence the reason why he was never consistent when it came to big games, because I think he just kind of rested on his laurels and just assumed that his talent would just come to him. And sometimes it failed him, sometimes it didn't. I think Wentz is out to make another case in the offseason in 2018 to show that his injury is not going to define him. And hopefully he won't have to get himself out of that deer in headlights look that Nick has had in the last couple of games, being that he's been away from playing in the past couple of years. And then on top of that, he didn't play preseason at all because of his shoulder injury. So it's fine when you see him the first week, because Giants, it felt like he was kind of playing like the old Nick, even though he wasn't great, but they didn't play as bad. And then the Raiders game, it just seemed like they kind of lost it and they never got it back. Even though they won, it just seemed like the defense, as bad as they were the only ones that seemed to wake up at the right time. So in all, what does this make me think? Well, it's weird how I've discovered a parallel between whatever Nick Foles is going through right now that's hindering his ability to play decently. And I think it has to do with when you're away from a certain sport, or when you don't practice intently until you actually have to play. And then something in your mind has decided to concede the team that you're supposed to be in charge of to the quarterback who basically mastered the position. I think that Nick Foles made a mistake of saying that this was Carson's team, and we know it's Carson's team. That's obvious. But when you're backup quarterback, you're supposed to assume that you're playing in his shoes, but not really, And I think that Nick kind of gave it away, or the power away, without Wentz being there, by saying it was his team. I think he should have just walked in there and said, I'm going to do what I do. And I know I'll never be Carson, and I'm not trying to be. I'm going to be an Eagle that's going to get this team to a Super Bowl. And it's kind of that kind of fake fervor that you kind of have to put out there and sell to the press so that they believe that, he wants to be the man right now. Now, mind you, that could start a whole nother QB controversy crap, and then everybody could talk about he's probably going to leave to go to another team and start again. But nobody's really going to take Nick Foles seriously as a starting quarterback at this point. He had his time in Philly. It didn't last when he went to LA, and St. Louis at the time, and it didn't last when he was in Kansas City. He is definitely meant to be a backup position. So I don't even think if he did play better than he has, I don't think he would be looking for another team. I think he would like to end his career here. But it looks like next year they might be probably looking for a third string backup to back up Nate Sudfeld, because it looked like halfway through that game, as according to Twitter, Nate Sudfeld was looking like he had a better arm than Nick. Now, mind you, Nate Sudfeld had not played in an NFL game ever, and he probably didn't throw as much as Nick has in his NFL career. So he's probably going to be a little sharper. Now, I didn't really watch the footage of that game because I really didn't want to. But now I'm thinking about it, I might actually, just to check out Nate, because pretty much that game was nothing to talk about at all. Not that the 17th week is really supposed to mean anything, but because we've been spoiled and blessed with such a very productive, surprisingly productive season by this team, the last 4 weeks have seemed like a big slap in the face. And so everything at this point is going to automatically be underwhelming. Radio has been kind of 50-50. People realize now that not only is it hard to listen to radio, 5 days a week when you're going on about how Wentz is not here and it's horrible and Foles sucks and he's definitely not going to take us there. I went there for about a week or two after the Christmas game because I really honestly saw any possibility of even getting to the playoffs looking really shaky. Now, mind you, because of our record, we're going there, but I really don't see us going past the first round. Now, hopefully, if we have a choice between the Saints, Falcons, and Panthers, I would rather either face the latter, either the Panthers or the Falcons. I do not want to face the Saints, but in a weird way, I think it would be good karma for Nick, because that's how he left the end of his season in Philadelphia, by losing to the Saints, and not due to his last minute good play, but because the defense didn't hold. Now, our defense has been shaky at times, but in general, they are very bend, don't break. And I don't see the defense folding like they did in that playoff round. So if they did play the Saints, I'd be nervous, but I do feel like they could possibly squeeze out a 2-point or 3-point win if it comes down to Jake Elliott's kick. So I'll just put that out there because I never even thought I'd say that. But as I think about it out loud, I don't think it's hard to believe that they could get past the first round, but I just don't feel the drive is there. Now, mind you, the last couple weeks kind of really don't matter. I mean, other than just locking up home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So maybe they were kind of pulling back on a lot of their plays, but I'm praying that somewhere along the line, Doug and the coaching staff realize that they cannot coach Foles like they do Wentz, that he is not the same guy. And I'm sure they don't believe it, and they just tell that to press so they can sell whatever positive vibe they can give off. But I think it's obvious that Doug is not really sure what he can do with Foles until he tries it. And I wouldn't be shocked if during the playoffs we see some new schemes that they'll try for the first time to see if if Foles catches on. I personally think they should just run the hell and only make him throw when they're definitely in the red zone, or at least closer to the red zone, and then if not, kick or do a 2-point conversion. I just see the running backs getting a lot of playoff play, as they should. That was something that they should have really did in the Super Bowl back in 2005. So I think this is the chance for Doug to really kind of win over that run versus pass ratio argument that seems to go through every sports season when we lose a game, or when, a big game is squandered because they didn't run the ball. So if Doug decides now to pull out the running game book, I think that people will love him for as long as he stays in Philly. I think if they look like they're participating against any team they face, that will be better than losing knowing that they pretty much packed it in from the first quarter on. This team, even though it may not seem like it has a lot of talent right now, I think it's just really the quarterback position that makes everybody doubt. I don't think anybody else on the team sucks. I think the only person who's been questioned out of anybody who just joined the squad this year is Torrey Smith. And that is just because even though, he probably was a great player back in Baltimore and 49er days, I think obviously there is an issue with timing and his ability to get separation in order to get a deep pass. I think Torrey's only caught a deep ball maybe once or twice this whole season. And if not that, he can't get off the ball or get off the break or whatever the saying is in order to be open in time for a deep pass or a slant. So I think that it's really going to come down to Aguilar and Mac Hollins and Burton or Ertz to clear that middle part of the field so that Foles can have easy throws. I know it's not going to always be there. That's why the other teams are called the opponents, because they can find those lanes that Foles delays in trying to make those passes to the wide receivers. But going back to my original thought, what I was saying was the Sixers game is on tonight, and they're playing the San Antonio Spurs. And I noticed that Embiid is playing, and supposedly, as Twitter was reporting, that he originally was going back and forth about whether they were going to let him play tonight because he had sprained his hand last week sometime or over the weekend. And I personally always feel like it's been obvious that Embiid is going to be susceptible to injury. And I feel like if he plays through it is the only way he can consistently get a flow on the floor. Because right now, as far as the first half that I watched before I started recording, the Sixers look more alert tonight. And they're home, which is good, but they've been home for most of the games that I've paid attention to, and every game it seemed like they would only be hot in the first half and then they would fall apart in the second. I think Embiid, being that he has never played, and with Nick hadn't played in a while, I think somewhere in your mind you kind of lose your awareness, your confidence, your flow, and it can easily look like you could easily look like a rookie or a novice out there once you've been away. They always joke after a 2-week bye or whatever, especially with the Eagles not playing until next weekend, is that good for them to stay away from practice that long? Well, apparently they were practicing today, so I don't really think they're going to be not practicing in all those 2 weeks. I really think, especially within the last couple of weeks, Doug would allow, 1 or 2 practices for the next week or two. I think they definitely will probably have to practice at least 3 to 4, or if not 5 times before they play so that it's all in their head. Hopefully Nick is practicing throwing and catching with a lot of the receivers like Aguilar does when he got over his hump. I mean, Aguilar, if anybody has improved as much as anyone has ever seen in a short amount of time, because he proved that it was mental. Embiid is proving tonight that his injury is mental. I mean, also his body is just not conditioned to play basketball as long as he's been in shorter time that he's been doing it, because he didn't play it all his life. And basketball is a certain type of conditioning that involves a lot of stamina. And sometimes, Embiid does look like he got ran over by a truck, but he still wants to play. And I think that's good for someone who has already gotten a back injury. Now his hand is blown up and his knees, and he had that surgery on his foot. So I think that Embiid is going to be a work in progress no matter how long he stays a Sixer. But I think it's a process that everybody is willing to go along, because like every sport, if we didn't have all the exposure to social media, we wouldn't know half of the problems that a lot of these players have. So because we know so much, we expect so much. And I think that people have to keep in mind with Foles is that, yes, he's the backup quarterback. Yes, he's not Wentz, but Foles is our quarterback now. And what he has to understand is he does not have to play like Wentz. He has to do what he can do to make them win. And that also means not pressing, which is probably what he's doing. He's pressing and he's putting himself in a position that he cannot fulfill mentally. So once he gets his mind clear and he stops going on that field and seeing ghosts, he'll play through it. You know, he's a Christian just like Wentz, and I'm sure Wentz has talked to him about not letting whatever you normally used to see mess with your head. It's a new field every game, and now you only got 3 weeks to do it. 3 weeks, 3 games to do it, to get over it, and it only takes 4 quarters. And I hopefully pray that, like I said, they remaster some of these playbook plays that work for Foles, that are easy. And, you know, they don't have to be sexy as long as they win the game. A lot of the plays that Wentz developed weren't really originally probably what they wanted him to do. But hence the reason why he's injured now is because he improvised a lot and sometimes too much. And that is why his knee is in a boot or in a cast. But and I feel like I should place a bet on when I think that he's going to actually be running and throwing again. I feel like by August he will be 100% back to what he's used to. I think they're going to limit how long he's in for every game that they put him in. But I think by September, October, maybe even end of September, early October, Wentz will be in full pads and playing for the first game for a whole game. He probably won't run as much now, because they always say that once you have an ACL tear that you can never really fully run on the knee as hard as you used to, because you're messing with tendons and all that stuff has to heal, and some of that stuff never really fully heals the same way. So he's going to have to alter his approach. I mean, hopefully Wentz won't start seeing ghosts for the first time he's in there. Hopefully he'll be able to be a little rusty and then eventually snap totally back into it. But time will tell, because we don't know what Wentz is like post-injury, because we've never seen him injured. This is our first time seeing a full season of him up until December. So at this point, I'm very thankful for Wentz's presence in Eagleville, but I think that Foles needs to get the full support of all of us fans. And I know it's not easy, because it's not pretty, it's not sharp, it's not consistent. But if it can create W somewhere in the last couple weeks of this season, it'll be wonderful. I personally don't care if they don't go to the Super Bowl. I don't feel like they need to at this point. They just need to get through a postseason successfully that they can look back and say, we can get back here and finish what we started. Now, mind you, we thought that the Eagles could get back where they started after the Super Bowl, but they proved it's hard. I mean, their schedule already is looking very, very hard next year. And they've only listed the home and away games. They didn't even say what days they're playing, but the away teams look like they're going to be hard to beat. And especially if Wentz is still coming back he's not even going to probably be fully playing some of those games. And if they decide to go away from Nick Foles and just have Nate start, who knows if Nate's going to last. So next year definitely is not going to have that sure thing going on from day one. It's going to have a lot of question marks, and pretty much the last 3 years have been a bunch of question marks in the postseason. So off season is definitely going to be even more intriguing than this past regular season has been. Now, as we approach this week, Wild Card Weekend is coming up, and there are a lot of games that we have to watch for to see what possible opponent looks like the Eagles could handle. Now, mind you, one game doesn't mean anything. I mean, they could play totally different when they come here, but yes, it is important to root for Atlanta this weekend. Obviously, the Patriots are not going to be an issue because we probably won't face them unless we do freakishly, some miracle, make it to the Super Bowl. And then that way it would have to be a very odd-looking rematch of 2005. That would be absolutely mad if we did make it. I wouldn't believe it for a second until it actually happened, because right now I don't see it. I don't see that happening at all. But if they did, for some weird reason, make it to the Super Bowl, they would definitely be facing the Patriots. Unless the Patriots trip up, because once the postseason starts, you're all 0-0. You know, there's no carrying over from the regular season. You're starting from scratch. So I'd like to believe that the Eagles are better in these last 3 games than they've shown. But who knows? They may catch fire. They may suck an egg. You know, I'd like to think that they would play desperate and play like it's literally their last game. And therefore, I don't know, hopefully just find some kind of clarity that'll make them see that field like it's an ice skating rink, and they all got the best ice skates on in the world, and they're skating, ducking and jiving and getting to the end zone every time. I don't know where I was going with that analogy. Sorry about that. But there are just so many things that are going on right now with us fans that make it such a conflict and make it such a strain on the heart to root for this team every time they get close, and then something comes in and just takes it all away. It's very easy to fall back into, here we go again, we're cursed and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, players get hurt. I mean, we lost a lot of players before Carson got hurt. So, and that was the biggest fear at that point. Once we had lost some of our key players, Carson was the one you wanted to pretty much bubble wrap until the end of the season. And then fate would have it, one little freakish thing took him out of the game. So I think mentally it'll take a lot for Carson to stay focused. He seems like he's already pretty much a determined individual, but I pray that whatever tries to creep up in his brain as he's recovering or as he's starting to get in the field again, hopefully won't show itself like it showed with Foles. But I'm hoping that Foles will snap out of it sooner than later, because one, if he wants to stay on the team, he's definitely going to have to get better. And also just because, you know, if you're this close, if you're only 2 games away from the motherland, then you just need to ship it in and, you know, put on that, I don't know, whatever. The point is, you know, at this point now, it's do or die. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to help somebody's psyche who's already kind of shaky before the post even starts, but just basically say, you have to get to the point where you trust that what you did before when you're on this field, and it wasn't in these situations, that it's just another game. Maybe that's all he needs. Maybe he just needs to know it's just another game. And if he plays it like it's just another game that you want to win, maybe he won't get in his own way mentally. So, you know, I know it doesn't really seem like something you need to do, but I would say a prayer for Nick Foles, just for the cobwebs to clear, just for everybody to be on one accord, just for them to crank out some wins so they can prove to everybody that everybody who's jumped off the bandwagon did the wrong thing. And as far as that, I wanted to state I will be making another podcast before they play next week, because there's going to be a lot of developments in terms of the coaching moves. I mean, right now the rumor is that Gruden will go back and coach for the Raiders before they transition to the Las Vegas Raiders. And it looks like some of the coaches on the Eagles coaching staff will be looking at possible head coaching positions this time next year. Not this time, but like if they do, they'll be coaching teams around this time next year. I personally am okay with Jim Schwartz leaving. I don't really think he's good enough that he needs to stay. I'm hoping that the next guy is, I'm praying we can find a guy that even comes close to Jim Johnson. May he rest in peace, because he was definitely the best defensive coordinator they could ever get. Hopefully the guys behind these fellas that are looking at other jobs will be just as good, if not better. And maybe we'll see some other looks from this team next year that are even more impressive than this year has already been. So here's to hoping that we grow instead of regress. And for all of those out there, just like the song that I opened with, airplanes and everything, for all those who have dreams in life, just keep trusting that even when it gets hard like this, just like the Eagles are going through obstacles, that you obviously don't place that dream in your heart unless you know you're going to accomplish it. So let's just pray that the Eagles will just get back on track like they always do, and fly, Eagles, fly. Hit your girl up, ajradiocaller@aol.com. Throw me a line if you want to on my regular email, ajones4078@gmail.com. And once again, you got me on Instagram, AJ Radio Caller, and my Facebook page, AJ the Sports Radio Caller. And yeah, so here until the next issue of Birds of a Feather. Peace out, y'all.
Staring at that phone in your lap, and you hoping, but the people never call you back. But that's just how the story unfolds. You get another hand soon after you fold. And when your plans unravel in the sand, what would you wish for if you had one chance? So airplane, sorry I'm late. I'm on my way, so don't close that gate. If I don't make that, then I switch my flight, and I'll be right back at it by the end of the night.
That airplane's